Welcome to the Butterfly Effect, brought to you by Moss Adams. I'm Chris Horner, and this is Stage 5 individual time trial of the Tour de France 2021. Now, this stage was always going to hold a lot of drama for us because we knew coming into the Tour de France, Stage 5 is going to start setting the precedent on who can win the Tour de France. First two stages, you have to get through with the crashes and the chaos and the uphill finishes. The next two stages, 3 and 4, brought more excitement, some protests, of course. Then Mark Cavendish winning Stage 4. Stage 5, now we're going to get into the fight for the GC. Now, want to point out, Mikkel Berg, UAE Team Emirates rider, who takes the race lead early in the stage. Now, Berg, he rode 100%, and this is mind-boggling to me because it does not make any sense at all. You have Tadej Pogačar on the team. We've already had 4 hard days of racing, and there's a lot more to come. This is the Tour de France, and this is only Stage 5. So when I'm watching Mikkel Berg there, and he's throwing in 100%, trying to win today's stage individual time trial of Stage 5, all I'm thinking is how much energy is this kid wasting right now instead of being able to ride on the front for Tadej Pogačar later. Now, we've already seen Tadej Pogačar in Stage 1, 2, 3, and 4, isolated many times and always at the finish of the stages. So it's crazy to me to watch UAE Team Emirates give the green light to Mikkel Berg. Now, he did an interview afterwards and he said his coach told him to go 100% a block. His coach told you to go 100% a block, and that's why you win. It's blowing my mind away if they're allowing a young kid on the team with Tadej Pogačar to ride 100% on a day that he could have used as a rest day, and he's going 100% because his coach told him to do it. Now, he'll do a fantastic time with a big effort, and he'll be in the hot seat for a bit of time to come. Brandon McNulty is the next rider I'd like to point out because he's UAE Team Emirates as well. Now, he goes down in a crash, and we'll see pictures of both knees damaged and beaten up. Again, I don't know how a rider on UAE Team Emirates could be going down in a crash unless his name is Tadej Pogačar. I understand Pogačar going down in a crash because he's going 100%. He's trying to gain maximum time. He's not hesitating through any of the corners, and he's on the limit the whole 27 kilometers of the stage. Brandon McNulty crashing, and we didn't get to see the crash. So if a dog came out, if a bird flew into his eye and that caused the crash, I can understand. If a pedestrian held out a sign, a cardboard sign, and that caused him to crash, I can understand that too, although it'd have to be quite a ways out in the road to crash in an individual time trial, so it's going to be hard fetched. But if it was one of those reasons, he's off the hook. If he was riding 100% on today's stage and taking risks going through the corners so that he can try to set a blazing time on today's individual time trial and crashed himself, that's just a knucklehead move, okay? UAE Team Emirates riding Berg 100%, I think, is a knucklehead move. Brandon McNulty, if he crashed for any reason that's associated with trying to ride today's stage at 100%, that's a knucklehead move. Because we all know Tadej Pogačar won last year's Tour de France, and we know he's a big favorite. I'm not playing Monday night quarterback. I've picked him as my #1 guy to win the Tour de France from way before the tour started. Going into this time trial with Tadej Pogačar, we know this is an important marker and possibly could even take the yellow jersey on today's Stage 5. Now, Stefan Kühn, the Swiss rider, is setting a blazing time. He's got a beautiful figure on the bike, just a statue-like up top and legs pounding on the pedals, and he'll come through and he'll take best time. Now, Stefan Kühn did amazing time. The rest of the big favorites still haven't left, though. All the big favorites, we're talking about the top 30 on general classification. Richie Porte, he takes off. He cannot beat the time. Sets a decent time for Richie Porte, but still not fabulous considering we're talking about Team Ineos. Richie Porte's time solid, but not great and not enough to kick off Stefan Kühn out of the hot seat. First to come up, that's of real importance, Primož Roglič takes off. Setting a decent time. We've seen how much scarring, how much bandage Primož Roglič has. So the idea that he's still in the race is exciting to all of us fans watching and gives us some hope when we get into the mountain stage. When Primož Roglič crosses the line, he cannot take the hot seat, and he's down on time, and he's going to lose about 45 seconds when this stage is finished. which is going to be important but not catastrophic. Next up, Geraint Thomas goes. Same thing. Okay time considering he crashed. He lost more than a minute when it's all said and done at the end of today's stage. But when he comes through at the finish of the stage, you're thinking he had a hard crash. We all saw it. Definitely should have been out of the race possibly. Instead, they reset the shoulder, got him back on the bike. Decent time, and he keeps himself up there near the general classification, which is the most important objective of today's stage for Geraint Thomas. Stay in the race, be a threat on general classification. Carapaz will take off, but his time won't be that spectacular, and he'll lose about 1:45 when the day is actually done. Next up in line, Rigoberto Urán does a solid time, but not enough to get him up there in the top 3 with the favorite general classification riders, but he's right there. We're talking about 7th or 8th on general classification after the stage is over. And really, when you look at the GC guys, depending on how you rate Alexei Lusenko, he's probably 3rd right up there in the general classification of GC guys after today's TT. So Rigo did a solid job to keep his EF education team with a chance at fighting for a podium or a yellow jersey at this year's Tour de France if there's some strange tactics to come. Next up to go is Tadej Pogačar, and he takes off the ramp, and there's still a second left before his countdown finish. That's right, he took off a little bit early. There's one official in the box with them that's doing the countdown. You always see them count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And there's another person that holds up the rider by the back seat. He'll step over the back wheel and hold the back seat up like this in place. Now, Tadej Pogačar, if he rolled off early, I don't know what that means in terms of penalty. For sure, he left at least a second early. You can see the clock on each side counting down still as he's rolling down the ramp. When you're watching it on video, you'll see the two guys that they start looking at each other like, I don't know what to do. They literally hands are up like this, and Tadej just keeps rolling. At that point in time, I'm starting to ask myself while I was watching it at NBC, I get on the radio, I start telling Joel, our editor at NBC, go back and look at it. We go back and we watch it again. He clearly leaves the ramp early, and the official do not know what to do about it. So Tadej Pogačar is off and running. Gonna have to find out later if they're going to penalize him for leaving early. Now, if I was Tadej Pogačar and I rolled off early, the biggest excuse I would be coming up with is I'd just say the guy let the seat slip, rolled forward, and you're down off the ramp, and there's nothing you can do about it. But I don't know the rules, so we're going to have to keep an eye out on all the websites to find out if he gets any kind of penalty on today's stage for leaving the ramp early. Certainly they need to deduct at least 1 second off his time. Now he's setting a blazing time at the first time check with the fastest time. Second time check, he's increasing the lead on Stefan Kuhn and still leader on the board on the second time check. When he crosses the line, he'll dislodge Stefan Kuhn and move into the hot seat. We got some other favorites back there though with Alaphilippe and of course Mathieu van der Poel still to come, and don't forget Wout van Aert. Wout van Aert has been saving his legs throughout the first 4 stages to try to win today's stage and take the yellow jersey. He'll take off, but his time, we can tell with the time checks from check 1 and check 2 that they're not good enough to beat Tadej Pogačar. We're seeing right away Tadej Pogačar is putting time, and he's going to gain time to jump over Wout van Aert. Now, Julian Alaphilippe is the next of the favorites to keep an eye on because he's in second place on general classification, only 8 seconds behind Mathieu van der Poel, but more than 30 seconds up on Tadej Pogačar. Julian Alaphilippe takes off, and as we see from the time checks, he's losing time and it's falling out in buckets. Julian Alaphilippe will have a disappointing stage 5 time trial, and he will not get the yellow jersey. On top of that, he's just losing places on the general classification. Mathieu van der Poel, race leader at this year's Tour de France, spectacular stage 2 win, and trying to keep the yellow jersey. Now, we don't know for sure how good he can time trial. So when he takes off, he only has just a little bit less than 40 seconds of a lead over Tadej Pogačar, who already had a blazing time. Mathieu van der Poel now is just losing seconds back there with each time check to Tadej Pogačar. When he crosses the line, he'll keep the jersey just by 7-8 seconds on Tadej Pogačar. Tadej Pogačar will demolish everyone and win today's Stage 5 TT, starting tomorrow's Stage 6, second on the general classification. Now, what's it mean for tomorrow's stage and future stages in the Tour de France for Tadej Pogačar and UAE Team Emirates? This was the best outcome you could hope for. They put maximum time on all the general classification's favorites, but did not jump over Mathieu van der Poel because Mathieu van der Poel put in a spectacular ride on today's stage and kept the jersey. Tomorrow's stage is flat. De Koen at Quick-Step will ride for sure for Mark Cavendish for a sprint. Julian Alaphilippe's not in yellow, so the whole team can be behind Mark Cavendish to try to win 2 stages at this year's Tour de France. For certain, Alpecin Phoenix will try to hold the yellow jersey through the next 2 stages, so they will ride with the Koen at Quick-Step on tomorrow's stage to make it a field sprint. Friday's stage has a hard finish, a very long stage at 250 kilometers, but hilly at the finish, but not so hilly where you can rule Mathieu van der Poel out for keeping the jersey on the stage of Friday. Saturday and Sunday, when things get interesting, UAE Team Emirates, look for some spectacular attacks at the beginning of those stages because UAE Team Emirates are in trouble. Now, they already lost Mark Hirschi, and he's hurting and under power at this year's Tour de France. He's in the race still, but he's definitely hurting. They rode Berg all day on today's stage time trial. For what reason, I don't know. And how hurt is Brendan McNulty after crashing in the time trial today? They got 3 guys that are question mark. They only started with 8. One's race leader. That's 4 guys they may or may not have when we start talking about Saturday and Sunday's hilly mountain stages, because you have Tadej Pogačar, but you can't ride him because he's going to be the favorite on GC. Brendan McNulty's questionable with his 2 knees hitting the ground today. Berg, who's not known as the best of climbers and used his energy up on today's stage of the time trial, and then Mark Hirschi. That's half the team that you can't use throughout most of the stage, except for Tadej Pogačar, who we all know you can use when we get into the last climb. He's going to have to work his own magic. So because of that chemistry, because of the lack of full strength from UAE Team Emirates, Saturday and Sunday stages will just be blazing hard, and attacks will come in big numbers on those stages. Hope you guys liked today's take on the butterfly effect. Tadej Pogačar was amazing. Mathieu van der Poel, absolutely solid. He's not a time trial specialist. Ineos boys, under par for what you would expect out of those guys. Primož Roglič, it was a great ride considering the crashes. And of course, Julian Alaphilippe, in my mind, he underperformed. Was hoping to see him back in yellow with De Koen at Quick-Step with only being 8 seconds down. Instead, he lost massive time. So I don't think we have 2019 Julian Alaphilippe here at this year's Tour de France like I thought we would have when he won Stage 1. Interesting result out of De Koen at Quick-Step rider. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys real soon.